Look at this. Look at this face. What can be said about this level of narcissism here? She continued celebrating herself by posting that she's in the #1 movie in the world, which is a remarkable thing to post when you are the laughingstock of an entire industry. This is what narcissism looks like. Narcissism for 200. Theaters are, of course, entirely empty. Do you understand that having people buy tickets is an important part of success in your industry? And it is actually so bad that Rachel Zegler decided to post a video of herself in a theater. Maybe I think she bought that ticket right there.
Rachel Zegler self-sabotages after Snow White movie loses money. That's the headline rocking Hollywood right now, like we needed another dose of megadrama this year. Before we dive into the twists, turns, and jaw-dropping receipts, smash that like button and subscribe if you're hungry for deep dives without the fluff. Trust me, you won't believe where this one ends up. Because if you think the meltdown stopped at the box office, oh boy, you're in for a wild ride. Let's rewind to the very beginning, back when Disney first confirmed a new live-action adaptation of its iconic Snow White.
This is what theaters look like across the world, and it just keeps getting worse. The memes.
First glance, everything seems standard issue for a massive studio release. A timeless fairy tale, big-name talent, and Disney's well-tested formula for reimagining classics. We'd already seen them tackle beloved titles like Cinderella, The Lion King, and Mulan, each with varying levels of critical and financial success.
In the greatest Disney box office bomb in the history of Disney live-action remakes, but certainly also the end of her career, decided to film herself in a theater totally empty, giggling, tee-hee-heeing with total glee.
But from the moment leaked details surfaced about this version of Snow White, the internet began to buzz with uneasy energy. The skeptic chorus was loud, but even then, few could have predicted the scale of the blowback about to unfold.
And at this point, Americans have rejected it. So not only the critics also didn't really like it all that much. 42% as a critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes, 1.7 out of 10 on IMDb.
Wait, was that a 74% fans
score?
Then came the first trailer, arguably the spark that ignited the powder keg. Within hours of going live on YouTube, it gathered an unusually high number of dislikes.
Let's say that you were in a Hollywood movie, and the trailer for that movie dropped on YouTube, and it instantly became the #1 most downvoted trailer in the history of the platform.
See the other side. What's the dwarf?
Dwarf refers to a person with one of several varieties of a specific genetic condition called dwarfism. A dwarf has disproportionate body parts.
In fact, it rose to the unenviable position of becoming one of the most downvoted trailers in the platform's history. Fans, casual viewers, and even professional critics zeroed in on perceived deviations from the 1937 original. Some had trouble getting past the updated dwarfs, rebranded as magical creatures or something similarly vague. Others were shocked by how star Rachel Zegler had described the classic story as outdated and in need of a modern rewrite.
Now, if there's one thing to be gleaned from this, it's actually the sheer quality of the negative reviews. So let me read you some quotes. It says, "I paid nothing to watch the trailer, but I want my money."
Oh, that's nice. Nice job.
This was especially jarring for those who cherish Snow White as Walt Disney's first full-length animated film, an artifact of cinematic history. Till Disney pressed forward, hoping to shift the conversation by spotlighting the movie's empowered retelling, a progressive spin on the fairy tale. Their marketing suggested a version of Snow White who didn't rely on a prince, who tackled modern issues, and who, in many ways, subverted the original's gentle protagonist. Yet instead of rallying behind this new perspective, large swaths of the online community became defensive, claiming that the classic story was being disrespected rather than updated. Critics on social media and YouTube posted side-by-side comparisons of 1937's animation and the new trailer, pointing out all the ways Disney seemed to be divorcing itself from the original charm. As these comparisons gained traction, the film's controversy snowballed, overshadowing any potential excitement about fresh interpretations.
But to go out and badmouth everybody and talk smack about, older movies in the same franchise, the canon story, I guess?
Yeah.
I don't know, dude. I feel like they Hollywood had better control over that.
The real tipping point arrived when box office estimates started rolling in. Even before opening weekend, analysts noted a surprising lack of pre-sales, especially concerning for a Disney property with global name recognition. Some wrote it off as simple franchise fatigue, hypothesizing that audiences might be growing tired of Disney's back-to-back live-action reboots.
And funny, this is a joke I made years ago, but if they streamed it on an airplane, I would still walk out.
Yes. That's old.
But when the actual numbers landed, it was worse than most predictions. The film opened to near-empty theaters in many regions. Social media exploded with photos of deserted lobbies, half-lit auditoriums, and lone viewers joking about having a private screening all to themselves. Industry observers began calling it a financial flop mere hours after its debut.
This is what theaters look like across the world, and it just keeps getting worse. The memes.
With Snow White, let's go through this, right? There's no prince. Woman doesn't need a prince.
Oh, Lord.
Really? Okay, good
Shut
luck
up.
back then. It's just so stupid. Like, of course you do.
The optics were devastating. Disney, the home of record-breaking hits, had unleashed a major property that appeared to be dead on arrival. Enter Rachel Zegler, who quickly found herself in the crosshairs. She had made waves in another remake, West Side Story, where her vocal prowess and strong screen presence garnered praise. But Snow White was an altogether different beast. The initial friction began when she described the 1937 film as seriously outdated, and took issue with the princess's original portrayal as demure and naive. For many fans, especially those who grew up idolizing the sweet innocence of Disney's first princess, her remarks felt like an open dismissal of the source material.
The bliss of total stupidity and narcissism. Look at the bliss. On some level, it's got to be a blessing to just be so smooth-brained.
Critics argued she was biting the hand that fed her, essentially condemning the very project she was hired to lead. Then, in an era where stars have unprecedented direct access to fans through social media, Zegler's public defenses of her role further fanned the flames.
YouTube unseats Disney, Nielsen's TV distributor rankings. YouTube hit a record of 11% of all TV viewing. Well. Disney is dying.
She posted about her film being #1 worldwide, a claim that swiftly drew sarcastic reactions when ticket sale data showed otherwise. Screenshots of her tweets went viral on Instagram and TikTok, fueling an onslaught of memes poking fun at the disconnect between her statements and reality. This dynamic only escalated after footage surfaced of her filming herself in a nearly empty theater, celebrating what she called a major win. To the online community, it looked tone-deaf, arrogant, or simply oblivious to the mounting criticism. Meanwhile, Disney's corporate leadership, including returning CEO Bob Iger, had a full plate. Not only did they face challenges from diminishing theme park attendance and streaming service complications, but they now had to conduct rapid damage control. The public relations team scrambled to clarify that Snow White's modern approach was well-intentioned. They emphasized that the film wasn't trying to erase the original, but rather to add depth and complexity. However, audiences seemed to have made up their minds. Many pointed to repeated instances of Disney meddling with timeless stories, drastically revamping plots under the guise of social relevance, only to churn out blockbusters that felt either hollow or overly preachy. The Snow White controversy became a lightning rod for broader frustrations with corporate Hollywood's perceived inability to honor nostalgia. And speaking of nostalgia, fans mourned the near-complete absence of the Seven Dwarfs, an iconic part of the story. Instead, the trailers and promotional stills hinted at a ragtag group of magical beings, some tall, some human-like, and some so unrecognizable that they might have been conjured by a random CGI generator. Peter Dinklage had earlier raised concerns about perpetuating stereotypes, prompting Disney to alter the dwarfs. But the abrupt shift left a lot of unanswered questions about whether the final product was truly championing inclusion or just muddling the story out of fear of bad press. As it turned out, this aspect alone could have been a minor controversy, but in tandem with everything else, it became another item on a growing list of fan grievances. Then came Zegler's stance on residuals, where she publicly declared that actors should be paid for every single click a film receives once it's on streaming platforms. On the surface, discussions about equitable compensation are valid, especially during a period when Hollywood's pay structures are being hotly debated. But the way she presented her idea, in the midst of an actor's strike, struck many viewers as naive or entitled. suggesting an impractical approach that traditional studios would never seriously consider. Online commentary asked whether she understood how the business model worked or if she was leveraging public sentiment to push a drastically new agenda. In any case, the conversation largely veered toward mocking her, overshadowing meaningful talks about fair wages and entertainment. As if that wasn't enough, word spread that Disney might be scrubbing future Zegler roles from their slate. Rumors emerged about her being removed from Toy Story 5, where she was slated to voice a character codenamed Spiral. Speculation also ran rampant about a new Pirates of the Caribbean reboot in which her name apparently vanished from early casting considerations. Of course, Hollywood is known for countless casting changes that happen behind the scenes for legitimate reasons, like rewriting scripts or budget constraints. But in light of Snow White's disastrous performance, fans wondered if these developments signaled that Zegler was now seen as a PR liability rather than a rising talent. The narrative that she was effectively fired from multiple high-profile projects became a fixture in online chatter. Even within the film community, those who gave Snow White an honest watch had harsh critiques. They described a production that lacked a cohesive tone. On one hand, the film clung to certain nostalgic elements, musical numbers and the fairy tale setting. On the other, it tried to shoehorn in modern ideological statements without weaving them seamlessly into the plot. Critics slammed the cinematography as uninspired, saying it neither captured the whimsical flair of a fairy tale nor the gritty realism that might refresh a classic. The direction felt indecisive, as if the creative team was torn between honoring the original spirit and crafting a bold, wholly new narrative. The result, they claimed, satisfied neither the purists who wanted their enchanting Snow White nor the progressive crowd seeking a substantial reinvention. Zegler's personal brand took a beating amid these swirling storms of controversy. Multiple entertainment tabloids published stories about her behind-the-scenes behavior, painting her as someone who clashed with production staff. Although these accounts remained mostly unverified, the negative press contributed to a snowball effect. Once public perception tilts unfavorably, every rumor or offhand comment is magnified. On social media, entire threads dissected her interviews line by line, focusing on any perceived slight against the original film or the fanbase. Memes proliferated, comparing her to other celebrities who'd publicly stumbled, such as Meghan Markle or Alec Baldwin, suggesting she was the latest star to lose public favor by going off-script and alienating audiences. Meanwhile, the reimagined dwarfs, or lack thereof, became an emblem of the production's identity crisis. While Disney framed it as avoiding offensive stereotypes, fans felt shortchanged of an essential element that made Snow White so memorable in the first place. Rather than engaging real dwarf actors or offering a nuanced update to the classic depiction, the film's approach seemed borderline experimental. CGI creatures that roamed the forest, presumably adding comedic relief, but in practice feeling disconnected from the essence of the story. Critics questioned why the studio didn't consult more broadly with the dwarfism community or at least craft a storyline that acknowledged the shift in a more substantive way. This half-hearted pivot did nothing but confirm people's suspicions that the adaptation was misguided. In the midst of all this, the unfortunate reality was that the film's attendance numbers didn't magically improve after opening weekend. By the second week, showtimes were cut in several theaters or reduced to single daily slots during off-peak hours, signifying that exhibitors anticipated minimal foot traffic. This complete inability to gain traction severely hindered any chance at a second-wave comeback or redemption arc. Disney faced the possibility of swallowing not just the production costs but a massive marketing budget that had been spent promoting what was now shaping up to be a lost cause. For Bob Iger, this fiasco arrived during a turbulent period for the company. Under his leadership, Disney once soared to new heights, acquiring Pixar, Marvel, and Lucasfilm. But industry changes, like the surge of streaming platforms and pandemic-related shifts in consumer habits, left the studio in a precarious spot. Snow White was intended to be a safe bet, leveraging time-tested brand recognition. Instead, it became a cautionary tale about how drastically audience expectations have evolved. The once monolithic Disney brand, untouchable in the realm of family entertainment, found itself the butt of jokes and negative memes flooding the internet. Observers speculated how this would influence Disney's broader strategy, especially for other planned live-action remakes like Lilo and Stitch or The Little Mermaid, which already had its own share of controversies. Some fans pivoted their frustration to the phenomenon of reboots in general. They argued that Hollywood's constant recycling of older properties, especially by a giant like Disney, can lead to creative stagnation. The Snow White meltdown only amplified those voices. People yearned for fresh stories or at least reimaginings crafted with a genuine sense of reverence for the original. Instead, they perceived cynicism, a belief that audiences would turn up simply because the brand is beloved. The meltdown proved that nostalgia is not a guaranteed ticket to success. especially when coupled with modern twists that feel contrived or forcibly inserted. Zegler's social media presence became a saga unto itself. Each new post, whether a tweet or an Instagram story, triggered waves of comments. Some supporters defended her, saying she was being unfairly vilified for voicing her opinion, especially in an era that encourages more inclusive storytelling and female empowerment. But the prevailing tone was harsh. People recirculated her quotes about working 16+ hours in costume, mocking her for complaining about typical on-set demands. Industry veterans weighed in, explaining that such grueling schedules are standard in big-budget filmmaking, particularly when elaborate makeup, wigs, or special effects are involved. Compounding these issues was Zegler's seemingly unwavering insistence that the new Snow White was a vast improvement over the original. She touted its emphasis on courage and independence, brushing off criticisms that her portrayal lacked the sweetness and vulnerability that had endeared the classic Snow White to generations. This approach backfired. Fans who revered the 1937 version felt not only dismissed but ridiculed, as if their love for the gentle, dreamy princess was outdated and trivial. In an attempt to champion progress, Zegler arguably alienated a core segment of Disney's fan base. Families and individuals who see these classic tales as timeless, not archaic. The rumor mill churned faster. Reports emerged suggesting that Blumhouse Productions, known for horror hits, had considered Zegler for a new trilogy but then backed out. Over at Warner Brothers, a political thriller in early stages supposedly dropped her from a key supporting role. While the specifics remain murky, and Hollywood is notorious for rumor over substance, the sheer volume of these claims pointed to a genuine concern that Zegler's negative publicity might be too large a risk for studios hoping to avoid controversy. Hollywood loves talent, but it also loves marketability. And when an actor's public persona threatens a film's success, studios often quietly recast. Which begs the question, can she bounce back? History shows that if an actor has genuine skill, one standout role can shift public perception. Robert Downey Jr. went from troubled star to Marvel hero. Kristen Stewart weathered the polarizing Twilight era to become an award-winning performer. But those transformations required a combination of the right role, strong box office returns, and a carefully managed PR approach. Zegler's unwavering outspokenness is a double-edged sword. It may garner respect from certain progressive circles but risks alienating mainstream audiences who just want to enjoy a reimagined fairy tale without feeling attacked for appreciating tradition. Meanwhile, Snow White stands as a significant failure that has ripple effects beyond Disney's bottom line. Challenges the assumption that reboots of classics are surefire hits. The fiasco underscores the delicate balance between modernizing a timeless story and respecting its core spirit. Fans have repeatedly demonstrated they can handle updates. Take The Jungle Book or Cinderella, which both introduce new elements but maintain the sentimental essence beloved by audiences. The difference here is that Snow White felt like a jarring departure, not a loving tribute. All the while, the dwarf's question lingers like a microcosm of the film's entire problem. Was Disney's approach driven by genuine concern for representation, or was it overcompensation for potential backlash? In the end, the final product satisfied almost no one. People who expected a faithful retelling complained about the missing dwarfs, while those seeking a modern, inclusive portrayal found the result half-hearted and arguably tokenistic. If one element of the story could encapsulate the entire meltdown, it's that, a big idea overshadowed by sloppy execution. Looking forward, Disney might well reevaluate how aggressively it updates other classics. Is the cost of bad publicity worth the risk of alienating loyal fans? While the studio probably won't abandon its live-action pipeline entirely, the Snow White debacle might prompt more careful planning, deeper consultation with original fan communities, and a more balanced marketing strategy. For some inside Disney, it could serve as a warning that the audience's goodwill is finite and that brand recognition alone isn't enough to carry a film. In the final analysis, Snow White transformed from a highly anticipated feature into a PR minefield. Rachel Zegler's comments about the original film, her stance on residuals, and her apparent disregard for fan sentiment painted her, fairly or not, as an industry upstart disrespecting a cultural cornerstone. Disney's hasty pivot with the dwarfs, combined with marketing messages that felt at odds with longtime devotees, completed a perfect storm. Whether Zegler finds redemption in future roles or remains a cautionary tale about speaking too freely in the age of social media is still an open question. Hollywood is famously fickle, and redemption arcs are never off the table. For Disney, the meltdown stands as a crucial inflection point. With iconic properties in their vault, they must tread carefully between innovation and the faithful stewardship that their audience expects. Snow White, ironically, might become the modern-day cautionary example of what happens when a beloved fairy tale is altered too sharply. or marketed without awareness of fans' emotional investment. The swift downfall of this film teaches anything, it's that nostalgia is a powerful currency, and once you squander it, regaining audience trust can be an uphill battle. And that, ultimately, might be the most lasting legacy of this fiasco. In an era of heightened cultural debate and lightning-fast social media reactions, studios and stars alike face narrower margins for error. One off-the-cuff quote, one misguided trailer, or one dismissal of a fan-favorite storyline can morph from a small spark into a raging inferno that scorches the entire production. Perhaps the next time a studio revisits an 80-year-old classic, they'll remember the meltdown that accompanied this Snow White, and think twice about straying too far from what made people fall in love with it in the first place. And that's the deep dive into the Snow White meltdown, a cautionary saga for Disney, Rachel Zegler, and the entire film industry. If you stuck around till now, you're the real MVP for wanting the raw facts and behind-the-scenes chaos. Keep it locked here for more celebrity bombshells and sizzling entertainment drama. Until next time, stay inquisitive, stay bold, and remember, no story is safe from a deep dive when Hollywood goes off the rails.